So most people in this room have been involved in software longer than I have. I didn't write my first line of professional code until just 4 years ago. And I've only been a team lead at Freiheit for a year and a half. But 13 years and about 15 kilos ago, honestly, I walked away from a career in the United States Marine Corps where I served as an officer. And the decade that I spent as a warfighter really shaped the lens through which I see a lot of the world, and that includes software and the software industry. And I know that most people in the room don't know what it means to be an officer in the Marine Corps, and that's okay because I'll start off with an orientation. Because whenever you're giving a brief or whenever you're giving a talk in the Marine Corps, it starts off with an orientation that gets everybody on the same page of where you're starting and where you're going. Because you can't move until you know where you are. So what might an orientation look like? Let's say that I showed you the latest imagery on Google Earth for where we should meet to go grab a beer after the conference. If I show you this picture, I guarantee you most people can't figure out where I'm saying to meet. But then if I say that that's the Elbe, at least you have an idea more or less that we're in the right city. If I give you the direction north, you can rotate this in your head when you look at a map. And then finally, if I say that we're where the star is in the image, you know that I'm talking about let's meet at Baby Goat after the conference because that's where it would be in the image. So it gets us on the same picture so that we have the same starting place, and then we can continue going wherever the talk or the brief is going to go. So I'll start off talking about just what is the Marine Corps and what is an officer in it, so you can know the starting point, and then we'll continue with the rest of the talk. An officer in the military is a generalist leader that will lead a team of specialists. That's the easiest way to really break it down. So the career of the officer is really just a leadership career. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of developing the people that are under your care. Now, the Marine Corps itself has no equivalent inside the European Union. It's a very small branch of the US military, and it's really a small self-contained military that has its own ships, it has its own air force, and it is a ground combat element, and it has a reputation for being extremely aggressive. But on top of that, it has to be extremely efficient and very decisive. It does about 25% of the country's combat operations, but it only has about 15% of the uniformed personnel, and it has about 4% of the Department of Defense budget. And part of that 4% includes supporting those ships that I had mentioned, where if the Marine Corps were its own country, it would have the second largest aircraft carrier fleet in the world, only behind the United States. So it's really not a lot of money, and everything needs to be efficient. It's also just not very big. There's no space for bloat. Now, how does the Marine Corps operate? It does something that's called maneuver warfare. And it seems right now like it's very far from software, but it all comes together. Oversimplified, maneuver warfare means that you're going to exploit an advantage that you have as a means of accomplishing some objective and accomplishing it effectively. What might that look like? If you have to take out an artillery battery, it means 6 of these guns and all of the people that are moving it, that are maintaining it, and that are actually operating it. And that's a pretty sizable force for you to take on, and that's a pretty dangerous operation if you can avoid it. But if all you have to do is keep this ChatGPT-generated forward observer from relaying coordinates, terrible picture, really, if you get into the details of it, then you've already accomplished the objective. You don't need to have that battle. You don't need to actually face the problem head on. You can solve the real problem instead of the problem that's easiest to see. And this isn't really a new concept when it comes to software. It's something that's already understood. If you look at the principles behind the Agile Manifesto, it even says that the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. There's a talk from the GoTo conference called The Best Programmer I Know, and in it, the speaker, whose name I can't pronounce, says that the best amount of code you can write is no code. The next best amount is little code. So it really comes back to that same idea. Why face a problem head on and make it really complex when you can solve the real problem in a much simpler way? The way that the Marine Corps does maneuver warfare is through something called mission-type tactics. Mission-type tactics They differ from command type tactics. Now, what does that mean? Because this sounds very textbooky. Mission type tactics, you tell people what to do. You don't tell them how to do it. Command type tactics are when you tell people what to do and how to do it. This differentiates the Marine Corps significantly from most militaries in the world. Even though NATO officially employs mission type tactics, the reality is that most militaries have a long cultural history of having command type tactics, of being told, here's what you're going to do, here's how you're going to do it, and just go execute it. Don't really think. The Marine Corps really can't afford that, and so it's all about just telling people what to do and let them figure out the how. In software, what might this look like? If your JIRA ticket reads like a recipe, you're probably using something more similar to command type tactics. Try writing the JIRA ticket as a user story. How does it affect things from the user's perspective? If you trust the engineer with what, the engineer will impress you with the how when they come up with how to do that. Now, a big part of mission type tactics obviously is mission, but we really don't have time to get into mission statements and what a mission looks like. But we will get into kind of the most important part of mission type tactics, which is the commander's intent. The commander's intent comes from the actual planning. And you spend a lot of time doing a plan because you spend a lot of time analyzing the problem. A problem that is well-defined is a problem that's already half solved. There's a whole process that you use for it, but the commander's intent is one of the main things that comes out of the whole planning process. It's a clear, concise, and easy to understand explanation of what the commander or the boss wants done. It has three key elements. The first one is expanded purpose. It tells you not just why you're doing the thing that you're doing, but how it fits into the bigger picture, how it fits into everything else that's going on around you. It gives you the key tasks that from the commander's perspective should be accomplished in order for you to be able to accomplish the objective. But the most important thing that it has is something called the desired end state. The end state is what ends up driving everything that you actually do. If you deviate from the mission, but you meet the end state, you meet the here's what done looks like, here is what I want accomplished at the end of this, you've actually done what you're supposed to do. The mission and the plan itself just kind of gives you limits or here's suggestions for it. So anecdotally, I'll give you an example. When I was in Afghanistan, I was part of the communications detachment for a task force. So we were supporting about 10,000 Marines. And one of the end states that we had is that the drone feeds that we were pulling needed to be visible in the operations center so that the operations watch officer could basically pre-position resources so that before they're asked for, things are ready. If you need casualty evacuation, the helicopter's ready to go. Now, this was the end state that was given to the detachment. The detachment was made up of several platoons. That task was given to a different platoon. It wasn't given to mine. And for reasons we won't get into, a few months later, when there were troops in contact, that platoon wasn't able to have the drone footage working, and they weren't going to be able to fix it. But I knew what the end state was. I knew that we have to have the drone footage working. So I can get one of my Marines that knows how to do it, and we fix the problem within a few minutes so that that was back up and running. If it had been command-driven and it hadn't been kind of the mission-type tactics, we would have said, well, that's something that they told them to do. We're not going to think about how we can solve it. We just let them do it. Now, in software, what does this look like? It looks like having a clear product vision, and it looks like having a clear user outcome. If you have a clear, shared understanding, then you really don't need to micromanage. The commander's intent is part of a plan, and that's what I mentioned. An important thing to understand is that no plan survives first contact. Now, that's obvious in the military what that means. But it's important to understand that a plan is just something that is a point from which to deviate in the future, because it's never going to survive reality, right? You make something that looks perfect on paper, but then as soon as you start executing it, it's not going to work. We have all had requirements change mid-sprint. We've all had code that worked in staging and it didn't work in production, and we've all had stakeholders that have shifted priorities mid-project. What's important is when you provide that clear intent of what the end state is, you need to give your teams the autonomy and the latitude to decide when they're going to split from the mission and split from the plan in order to actually accomplish the end state. So it's really about having autonomous teams that are given the latitude to make the decisions that they need to make. But my message is not just about plans and systems, because when you have plans and systems, they're carried out by the organization, and an organization has ethos and culture. So what are the ethos? What is the cultural thing that separates Marines from others? I would say that it's a bias for action. And I think that any organization that demands a bias for action will always elevate its performance. So a bias for action, it means don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. How often have you seen a team spend 2 weeks debating what's the perfect architecture when they could have built a prototype and had it launched in 2 days, and then just iterated from that point on? That's the difference between a bias for analysis and a bias for action. A simple example of this in the real world, coming back to the military piece, is I had this $1 million system that we needed operating. It's called a SWAN. It's a VSAT, it's a satellite communication system. But the problem with it is that the little hydraulic arm wouldn't hold the dish in place. We can lock on the satellite, and then over the next few minutes, it would just lose, the link. So we're trying to figure out, well, what do we do? And everybody is trying to see, can we get new parts in? Can we get a new system in? It was very important that it worked. Well, we had a 19-year-old junior lance corporal just run up to the thing and put on a pair of vice grips, right? Just lockable pliers. And then that solved this multi-million-dollar significant problem that we had. Now, he knew that he can do that without asking anybody's permission, without checking if this is going to work, because he sees there's a problem. I think I have a solution. Let me try it. And if we don't have a bias for action, we're not going to do that, right? I think the problem that we have is that in the school systems, we're taught to only have the right answer. And that's what you need to really push out of people, that you have to have the right answer. You need to try something, and you need to not be afraid to do the wrong thing in trying. If you're only trying to do the right thing, then you're never going to take any risk. Legendary Marine James Matt is still alive, said that if risk takers are punished, then you will retain in your ranks only the risk averse. The way that you get away from that is you have to reward boldness. Now, that's not that we're looking for recklessness, right? Nobody wants reckless behavior. But the difference between boldness and recklessness is only learned with experience, right? That's what teaches you the difference. So you have to make sure that your people have the safety to take risks and to make mistakes, because that's how they develop that bias for action, which will elevate the performance. So just don't punish well-meant errors. The most important thing that I'll talk about, though, is that no matter what, every team needs to make sure that it puts its people first. In the Marine Corps, there's a lot of ways that we talk about doing this. Very famous adage is that officers eat last. There's been many times where I haven't gotten to eat because there wasn't enough food to go around. So the people that you're taking care of, they eat first, and you'll get what's left. There's also this idea of one bullet away. You're one bullet away from your boss's job. So have you prepared yourself to take that responsibility and to take on that role? And conversely, are you grooming the people underneath you so that they can take your role and they can replace you when need be? One bullet away is a very military thought, but in all of our companies and all of our organizations, we're one diagnosis away. We are one family emergency away from being in the same exact position. We need to make ourselves replaceable, and we do that by grooming the people that are underneath us and helping them grow. With that, if you're a lead, do you know the personal and professional goals of the people that are in your team? And when you know their personal and professional goals, what are you doing to help them get there? Are you giving them the space to grow? Because they're the ones that are going to be the future of the organization, right? And unless you give them the space to actually do things a little slower, but actually learn from it, you're not going to grow. But I think the best way that I have to explain putting people first is something that's going to sound very, very boring, but it's the table of organization and equipment. Every unit in the Marine Corps has a TO&E, table of organization and equipment. It lists every person that's in that organization, and it lists every piece of equipment. And in there, it assigns the weapons that belong to each person. So for me, in my TO&E as a platoon commander, I had 2 weapons assigned to me. I had a 9mm pistol, and I had a short-barreled rifle. But for anybody that's not initiated, you would think, well, those are your weapons. That's what you take in. But the reality is that my platoon was my weapons. These people, half of whom were teenagers, were the ones that can solve the problems that I wouldn't even see coming. And as a group, they could accomplish more than I can ever hope to accomplish on my own. And the way they did that is by me enabling them to be able to do that, giving them the tools that they needed to do their job, and making sure that they're able to grow within within their career. So if we bring all this together, the key takeaways are that you always need to start off providing an orientation. You need to get everybody on the same page, because if you don't know where you are, you don't know where to move to. You need to make sure that we solve problems efficiently. Don't just solve the easy problem, but solve the real problem that needs a solution. Don't just provide tasks. Make sure that you provide an intent, and then give them the latitude that they need to work on that. And part of that is make sure that you keep plans flexible. Recognize that no matter what you write, the plan is going to change once it enters the real world. You have to demand a bias for action. That's the biggest secret to elevating the performance of any organization. It's pretty easy to instill, but it's fundamental to making sure that you're able to perform better. And then finally, just make sure that you always put people first, because at the end of the day, it's mission first, but it's people always. It's always going to be about the people that you have. Now, I got done a little bit faster. It's because I shortened this to a 20-minute talk when it started off as a 90-minute talk on the Marine Corps planning process. But I hope that some of the perspective that I bring is helpful, and that you recognize that there's some carryover into software. This is a topic that I love talking about, so if you see me in the rest of the conference, feel free to pull me aside, and happy to talk about it, or just write me on LinkedIn, and again, happy to talk about it, even though apparently my program moved my name over from LinkedIn. So with that, if anybody has any questions.